Welcome everyone. I'm so excited to be returning to my tarot series. This time, I'll be creating my interpretation of the Empress card. I'll be taking a Cleo to Nile from the Monster High range as a base for this creation. I prepare her as usual by cutting off all her hair and removing her factory makeup with 100% pure acetone. I plan on rerouting this doll, so my first step is to paint her scalp to prep it. I really want her hair to be a rich, deep copper tone, so I mix up that colour and paint it on. I rummaged through all my stock, but I didn't have any doll hair or acrylic yarn of the right colour, so I decided to mix my own. I'm going to be combining 4 different colours of yarn to create the perfect tone. The orange provides the base colour, the burgundy will add depth and darkness, the yellow will counteract the red and keep it a true orange tone, and the beige yarn will create a final colour that's more dusty and natural rather than being too vibrant and unnaturally pigmented. I use my usual pulling method to extract the longest possible fibres from the yarn. And then to mix all the colours together, I simply repeat the pulling process over and over until they're all blended. Each time I pull, I try to pull a very small amount. This helps to create a more blended finished product. Once I'm happy, I'll pass the hair through a straightener to make it nice and smooth and shiny. I've regrouped her hair off camera, so now it's time to start her face up. Cleo has a very severe face mould with super high cheekbones, a sharp jawline, and very elongated cat eyes. For my interpretation of this tarot card, I wanted to create a character with a very generous and soft look. So when I sketch out her eyes, I decide to really fight the doll sculpt and go with an exaggerated downturned doe eye shape. I was nervous at first when making this combination, but I think it turned out beautifully and evokes the exact feeling I was going for my Empress. With the eye shape established, I can start adding more details, like her eye crease and some colour on her lips. I usually never add eyebrows on my first layer of the face up, but I just wanted to make sure her overall expression worked well on her mould. So I decided to break tradition and sketch them in extra early. I dot on some watercolour freckles to start building up the details and lifelikeness of her skin. I ended up applying freckles to almost every layer of the face up, separated by sprays of Mr. Super Clear spray varnish. I think the way the freckles layer with different applications of blush, highlight and MSC brings a more dimensional look to the finished face. On my second layer, I add black to the top eyeline as well as sketching in some individual hairs on her eyebrows. I add some more peachy colour to her lips and also add a bit on top of her blush to help keep the face looking cohesive. I add some shadows to her eyes, and it's time for another round of freckles. Onto the third layer, and one of my favourite steps, adding shadow to the top half of the eyes. For this girl, I wanted to keep her eyes quite light and friendly, so I use a mix of navy blue and light grey to create the colour for the shadowing, instead of a deeper grey or black, which I sometimes use. I draw in some thin, long lashes and add the tiniest amount of black pastels to help them look nice and full. I of course watched all the videos posted as a part of the big Halloween collab, and during Jackie O's video she spoke about how it can be hard to experiment and take risks when you're creating for YouTube, because we're always making art for content, and if something goes wrong it affects that content. I was thinking about this during the face up and decided I wanted to take a little risk, even if it's pretty teeny tiny. And so, when adding my final painted layer, I decided to experiment with watercolour paints instead of acrylic. I know it's not a huge risk to take, but it was a very different experience as the mediums behave very differently to each other. I think that the blotchy green highlights in her eyes are really cute, and a fun change from my regular look. I ended up still adding a tiny bit of white acrylic for that super pigmented highlight, but I do think I'll keep incorporating more watercolour paints into my face-ups in the future. I love how soft and artistic they can look. To finish the face, I give her a dusting of gold highlight powder, and she's done. For her hair, I decided to go with a low braided bun. Something clean and neat, but still with the details in the braids. To make sure her body matches her face, I add highlights, blush, and freckles to her décolletage. I also blush her hands and draw cuticles and nails to the tips of her fingers, plus little wrinkles on her knuckles. For her outfit, I start by cutting pieces for a Renaissance-style gown out of this dusty mint-coloured velvet. I assemble the top, adding some puffed elbow details, and then attach the skirt. For the underskirt, I chose this patterned silk. I love the floral design, and the use of golds and greens is perfect for this outfit. The Empress card represents the physical body, the material world, and the abundance of life in all its forms. She also has ties to motherhood and creation. I've read the Empress be described as perfectly beautiful, totally natural, untouched by artificial colours, lights, or sounds. This really influenced my design for her and her outfit. I wanted her to be only colours of nature and the harvest. Of course, she had to have lots of green, representing fresh growth, but I also wanted to include the shades of gold and copper you would see in a field full of grain ready to harvest. To give her the regal appearance she deserves, I give my Empress a beautiful long cape. I have the same silk I use for her underskirt, but in a dark colourway, and I cut it to shape, along with a piece from this beautiful rich brown velvet. I sew them together, right sides facing in, and then flip it to hide the seams. I have this super cute gold clasp with a floral motif which is perfect for this design. I cut a small piece of faux fur to act as a trim and use fabric glue to attach all the pieces to the inside of the fur. Once the cape and the straps are in place, I can fold the fabric over and glue my fur taco in place, securing all the pieces together. I 3D print some shoe bases for my doll. I spread on some all-purpose glue and then carefully lay on some of the patterned silk. I smooth out the front of the shoe and then fold it down and smooth out the top. Once that glue is dry, I add some more to the base of the shoe and tuck in the excess fabric across the sole. I trim off the rest of the silk and I'm ready to decorate the rest of the shoe. I take some leafing size and paint it on the rest of the exposed shoe, leaving the size for about 20 minutes to become tacky. I can then adhere some gold leaf and gently brush off the excess. Of course, an empress needs a crown, and to pay homage to her relation to motherhood and creation, I wanted to give her a circular crown to represent the circle of life. I took a lot of inspiration from the kokoshnik, which is a traditional Russian headdress that's been around since the 10th century. The shape I'm making isn't traditionally accurate by any means, but since my tarot dolls exist in a fantasy universe, I really enjoy taking historical fashions and giving them a twist, and combining them with different elements from other times and geographical locations. To add extra drama to the headpiece, I'm going to be adding these large copper tassels, which happen to match the colouring of her cape perfectly. To allow them to hang from the crown at the correct height, I snip the hanging loop to create one long cord, which I can glue to the base. The base is made from Warbler thermoplastic, which I heated up to give a soft curve. I then spent many hours off camera threading cream, gold and green beads onto thread to decorate the crown with. The back of the crown will be covered in the same brown velvet as her cape. The front of the crown then gets decorated with the same beads in a concentric pattern. I glue them on with a glue made especially for rhinestones and beads, and I was super happy with the result. They seem really sturdy, and I'm not worried about any of them falling off. So once the glue is dry, I can cut off the excess threads. I want the ribbons to be tied into a bow at the back of her head. You'll find when making doll clothes that fabric doesn't always fall in the same way in miniature than it does in full scale. For this reason, I'm not actually tying the ribbon into a bow, and rather gathering the ribbons together with thread and creating my own perfect bow to glue on top of that gathering. To create more cohesion throughout the doll, I hand sew some beads onto her underskirt, as well as gluing on some rhinestones because I simply cannot help myself. I also create a gold necklace for her and add 2 rhinestones to her ears as earrings. And with that, she's all done. I'm so happy I can return to this series again. My next video will be a collab that's really pushing me out of my comfort zone, and then after that will be another tarot character. Please like this video to support my art and subscribe if you want to see more of my content. Also leave something in the comments below. I really love hearing what you all have to say and I read every single one of your comments. If you have any tarot cards you really want to see turned into dolls, please let me know. And don't forget to check out My Devil, the first chapter of this series. Without further ado, I present the Empress. Thank you so much for watching. Your support means so much to me. I'll see you next time. Have an awesome day.